Doing Garvey, not just talking Garvey. Welcome back another day. Bill and Brother Siddiqui. Of course, Kidnapped African once again has another subject matter I want to cover. Why does it seem like we're an abandoned people? You know, many African leaders know we don't have a homeland. Our homeland is only considered America. Like we weren't the people who had been kidnapped, sold out of the African continent, sold to the conqueror. Some of our ancestors or ancestors of brothers and sisters on the continent participated in this activity. There always isn't a reference when they talk about history of Africa on the African continent. The history of slavery comes up, you know. Then the subject goes right into colonialism. But it seems as though that us kidnapped Africans was just cut off at the once colonialism started. That was it, you know. Us Africans that were kidnapped and taken somewhere else were never to be thought about anymore. We're like trash, we're an abandoned African. You know, many of these African leaders know the story about the colonialism of Africa. They also know about the slavery of Africa. You know, just because us kidnapped Africans was born in America, I'm talking about us kidnapped Africans that are from America. Now, someone else can discuss this subject matter that might be from the Caribbean, people in the UK, and South America. But of course the islands. But my history is here in America. You know, us kidnapped Africans were brought here. This is my history here in America. And you don't hear any of the so-called Pan-Africanists on the African continent discuss us kidnapped Africans being returned back to the African continent, or a policy in the constitutions being drawn up or to be amended to accept us back home to the African continent. You know, it's not of our it's not our fault that we were taken to America. I spoke to some Africans on the African continent in Kenya and in Tanzania, from two places in which I resided and visited and conducted business. Many people says, "Hey, I wish I was the one my people were the one that's taken to America." Well, us kidnapped Africans, those who know about our heritage and know where we came from, and still have the love and come to find the love of Africa, we don't share the same thought pattern, especially knowing the fact that Africa is our homeland. Our ancestors didn't have a choice as far as to be able to come back to the African continent and recover some of the losses, you know, not just the material things, but also their soul, their spirit, their culture, you know, that was left behind. Many of these African leaders, they study, they know the history of this travesty of slavery, you know, don't want to take any blame concerning the enslavement and the selling of us kidnapped Africans. Just want to ignore that fact, but want to speak on the fact that Africa needs to build itself back up. What happened to cause Africa for the demise of Africa? What was one of the biggest things that occurred on the African continent that create some of the conditions that's in the African continent? One of those things was us kidnapped Africans being taken out. Let's start start there. Of course, you know, the Arabs was a big part of the first part of that slave practice, you know, on the African continent. And then, you know, you have the European, their participation, and the Spaniards. You can't discuss Africa's situation without discussing us kidnapped Africans, you know, and what we had lost as a people: culture, identity, land, you know, people. Why isn't the African continent, you know, even at the African Union, discussing how to get the kidnapped Africans back onto the African continent? This is why I consider and titled this this video, "The Abandonment of the Kidnapped African." You know, Africa has abandoned its children. You know, it's just like Boko Haram taking the children out of in Nigeria and taking them somewhere and keeping them for years, you know, saying, and then they return. Are they allowed to return? Or because it was just that short period of time, 5 years, 10 days, doesn't matter. Are they welcome back to come home to where they're originally from? You know, does it take, because it took us hundreds of years of realizing that we had an opportunity, or when the opportunity arose to where us kidnapped Africans was able to return back to the African continent, that you know, we stayed away too long for us to be accepted as citizens back onto the African continent. You know, African leaders talk about Pan-Africanism. It's another subject. Pan-Africanism means what? Pan means only on the African continent, or does it mean all Africans wherever? The diaspora as well as the Africans on the African continent. We seem, in the African Union, we seem to never be mentioned as a people of African. They talk about the 6 regions, but you never hear any of that real discussion on any social media, as any kind of dialogue that takes place. Us kidnapped Africans are not a welcome people when it comes to talking about being a citizen on the African continent. Why is that? Why don't the African leaders consider us kidnapped Africans as Africans? You know, we're relatable people. You know, the push for Africa's freedom came from much of what we were doing, and especially in America. Us kidnapped Africa was advocating for Africa's freedom. As much of our movements, many of the leaders that was here, some of those leaders was from the islands, and some was from, I guess, I can't even say it's from Europe. Many of that movement happened in America, from us kidnapped Africans in America. I was just wondering, when are the African leaders going to step up to the plate and say, the kidnapped Africans need to be given some kind of, not just restitution, but some kind of opportunity to return home, to assist us with helping to build the continent, because it is still their home. Because of all these borders been established, they should not be ignored about wanting to come home. You know, we should be acknowledged as children of Africa. We have the same features. Many of us have the same features, depending on what part of the continent you're from. You know, but this nappiness definitely tells you that we're from the continent. This nose is identifying, these lips. Mine isn't as thick as some, but same things on the African continent. Our features are still, the African feature is still present. African leaders have to become more worldly in their understanding of who the kidnapped Africans are, and realize that we are the family and we are the children of their ancestors. Our return will be a blessing to the continent for what we have gained by being kidnapped and being in the land of the so-called superpower worlds. It's us kidnapped Africans who have experienced that and gained a lot of knowledge to be able to be brought back to help build the continent. At this time, I'm loving with the brother Ibrahim Traoré. I think one brother is Goka and Mali and Sima, I believe. But Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. The revolution is happening, It can make it even more of a true revolution by requesting us kidnapped Africans to come home and giving us some kind of document to identify us as citizens and residents of the continent. And they'll see what kind of development that happens with our presence. So many Africans from America is not going to come back. It's just not their desire. Many of us have been told so many different things concerning Africa. So they have no interest. They feel as America is their home, because of their consciousness. That's where the conscious level is. But us kidnapped Africans who are who have the desire to wanting to be back on the continent should get given a red carpet, open arms to be able to say, welcome home, truly welcome home. Now welcome home, how much money you got? Well, you got to pay this fee, you got to pay that fee, you got to pay this fee, and you only can have it for only 2 years. Yeah, it's several thousands of dollars, but don't worry about it, you know what I mean? You have to still pay it in the next 2 years to get it, for you to be a resident here. It's not citizenship, but it's residency here. You make sure you establish a company, a business, so you can employ somebody if you want to be here. That's for people who can't get any kind of retirement. Those who don't have any retirement, you got to put out so much money. Create a company. You got to pay all these taxes. You got to pay all these fees to be able to get into that African country, and then you have to do it all over again as far as your work papers. You got to pay for all of that kind of stuff. It's us coming back to the continent, we treat it just like any other race that's coming back to the continent. Us kidnapped Africans we didn't make the choice to leave up out of Africa. But one thing, these African leaders consider us the same as the conqueror, which is sad because they're supposed to know the history. We're people that's been displaced ourselves. It's like people in the floods that moved away from areas which the water has damaged so much of, like in Kenya and Tanzania. We're in that narrative, we're displaced people. Just like those brothers and sisters who was there in those areas that they lost land, lost their belongings. We're something like the same people. We lost so much. We want to come back home now that we realize that we do have a home. Myself, I feel so welcome when I'm back on the African continent. I feel so comfortable, because of the fact that seeing nothing but me, seeing nothing but our people. Yeah, I see the struggle. At the same time, I see my people, and I see the things I can assist and contribute to create some change on the African continent. I see all the stuff that African leaders neglect, and doing their duty as a public servant to create some of those changes and that's needed for there be better conditions for brothers and sisters in those countries, those areas, towns, whatever the location, cities. I see that where it can be changed, but many of these leaders just neglect their responsibility. The finances are there. Africa is rich with resources to be able to create all the changes that it needs. People can be put to work like that. I don't know why, not letting us kidnapped Africans come home with all the stipulation. It don't make any sense. Don't make any sense. When we can be a benefit. It's like Africa don't have no welfare. Where's the burden? We've been asset we're creating because we know hustle. We have some of the finances to be able to assist in some of the development, creating employment. African Union, it's like it's straight up a puppet of the conqueror. Check out the policies that's going on. It's the reality that continue to suppress the development of Africa. They can't even get together to push the free trade. What is it called? The policy that's being supposed to be implemented. African leaders are so stuck on not wanting to give up any kind of power, even with the free trade, opening up the borders, which benefit them. But I'm here in America. You go to Philly, you go to New York, you go to DC, you go to Texas. All you do is go through tolls. There's no personal documents you need, none of that. And America is bigger than, a quarter of Africa. So how many countries is in a quarter of Africa? A whole West Africa can fit in America, including, say, the Sahel or North Africa can fit into America. It's a lot of countries you're talking about, and we don't have any borders. Of course, you put 3 Americas, United States, in Africa, but at the same time, you could put a quarter of Africa in America. You look at all those countries, all of West Africa and the Sahel. Sahel, North America, all the way across to Ethiopia. But these borders is killing Africa, has killed for years. Then you got these greedy African leaders who got these little small countries thinking they got so much power. Only because they got, they became African leaders and stole elections and controlled the people with strong arming election. It's just so sad, And they know if us kidnapped Africans are on the continent that we'll be too vocal for them to really suppress without them having to do something to us. some of these policies of not letting us come back on the African continent, it's also a hidden hand with that just as well. America has a hand in, telling, keep your borders closed, you're gonna lose your power if you do. They know they can't just be manipulated like that, they will be continue to be manipulated like that if they keep their borders closed. They know that they're not going to excel, or they will be too exposed if they allow those borders to be open. You can no longer hide those dollars, or you'll hide all the theft that's going on if they open the borders and allow that free trade to happen. Well, I'm just, once again, it's just a shame that us kidnapped Africans are an abandoned people. African leaders choose not to give us an opportunity to return home like we need to. The history, they seem to be, I use the word stuck on stupid, for not wanting us to come home, because it was so much of an asset more than something that's going to create an issue for Africa's development. We are the development. We developed Europe and we developed America. Just allow us home, We are your children, abandoned children, kidnapped children that still lives out in the diaspora. Peace, stay strong, stay black, stay focused.